Match day 6 of the 2026 FIFA World Cup qualifiers on the African continent have officially concluded, and they brought about a lot of drama, entertainment, and quality football. We're going to recap all of the action and more coming up next on the African Five-A-Side podcast. Hey y'all, welcome back to another episode of the African Football Report on the African Five-A-Side podcast. I'm your host, Maher Mezahi, and as always, this podcast is brought to you by africasaCountry.com. Nowadays, we've been publishing a lot of articles. I think there's a really good one that I read called Imperial Belonging and Weaponization of the Sea. And the subtext is the legacy of France's colonial violence in the Indian Ocean is one stone that contemporary mainstream media tends to leave unturned. Um, a Comorian writer wrote it, and I think it's really illuminating, especially if you're unfamiliar with the history of that region. So, if you're interested in reading that article, you can find a link in the description below. But yeah, African World Cup qualifiers have pretty much wrapped up. The March window is always a little bit weird, as I mentioned before, because it's really in the middle of the season, towards the end of the season. A lot of players are injured, a lot of fatigue, and as a result, they're difficult to predict. But I think I'm pretty proud of how I foresaw these matches going. Prior to the break, I said the teams I expected to wrap up qualifying were Morocco, which they practically have, Egypt, which they practically have, Morocco beating Tanzania and Niger over these last two matches, Egypt beating Sierra Leone and Ethiopia. Uh, Cameroon, even though they drew with Eswatini, they ended up beating Libya 3-0, and now they're top of the group. And then Cote d'Ivoire had a pair of 1-0 victories that have them at the top of their group, and then Tunisia. These are the sides that I expected to wrap up qualifying practically. The teams I expected to make up a lot of ground and to put themselves in a good position were Senegal, who are coming back from a long way and are now just 1 point behind DRC at the top of the group. Nigeria, and I whiffed with that one. I wasn't sure about it. I mentioned I wasn't sure about it, but the fact that they drew the second match against Zimbabwe really, really hurt them. I also had Algeria, Burkina Faso, who put in a pair of victories, resounding victories for both of them. South Africa, which also had a pair of victories. DR Congo, uh, top of the group. Gabon and Mali. Mali had a tough draw with Central African Republic, but other than that, feel confident again with all of those predictions. And then the teams that I thought would drop points were Angola, which they did, Guinea-Bissau, which they did, Sudan, which they did, Benin, Uganda, and Madagascar. So honestly, I feel really good about it, besides the Nigeria pick, uh, and maybe one other. But I managed to watch 6 to 7 matches during match day 6, and what I really want to do is really give my observations, because if I could provide any kind of insight, if you guys maybe want to hear my opinion on any of the matches, I think that's what makes this podcast valuable. Um, and so that's what really we're here for. So the one first match I want to talk about, because I didn't watch any matches from Group A or Group B, was Benin nil, South Africa 2. Now, Benin doesn't have a homologated stadium, so they've been playing in Cote d'Ivoire, and this match was no different. They're playing at the Stade Félix Houphouët-Boigny in Abidjan in Cote d'Ivoire, which brings back a lot of great memories because I was there, of course, 15 months ago. And boy, I can tell you that stadium around this time of the year is very hot and humid. I remember going to the snack stalls, and they were selling, oh, so good, but they're selling like these iced, like, uh, ginger juices, ginger drinks. Um, and the other one was, I think it was hibiscus. And I remember smashing like 3 of those ginger drinks. And then as soon as you finish the ice drinks, they're crushed ice, they go down so smoothly. Um, 15 minutes later, you're just sitting in the press box, not moving, not screaming, not yelling, anything like that. Just the humidity just gets to you and you start sweating again. And I'm somebody that sweats easily, but not like that. And it's because that stadium is on the lagoon in Abidjan. If you pull up a Google Maps of Abidjan, you're going to see that there's a lagoon that cuts through the middle of the city. And as a result, it's just very humid. There are bats that are circling the stadium. So it's a difficult place to play, but at the same time, it's very cool because you see the skyscrapers of Abidjan behind. You see the platoon from, oh, sorry, the lagoon from parts of the stadium. I still remember that stadium very, very fondly. So whenever I watch a match there, I sort of have a smile on my face. However, some people that didn't have the smile on their face prior to the match were the South African Football Association, because Although they were top of the group, getting ready to perhaps even extend their lead against Nigeria if they won that match and Nigeria dropped points, which eventually happened. The news came out before the match that South Africa had played an ineligible player, Teboho Mokoena, the Mamelodi Sundowns midfielder, picked up a yellow card on match day one and on match day four of these FIFA World Cup qualifiers, and therefore he should have sat out last match a few days ago against Lesotho, but he actually played that match. And as a result, we're expecting South Africa to have that result of that match overturned. They beat Lesotho in real time 2-0. But according to precedent here, Nigeria were docked points like this. I believe it was Ethiopia were docked points like this in 2013. We are expecting that result to be overturned and South Africa to be docked 3 points. And somebody at the South African Football Association needs to be held accountable for this because it's inexcusable. Now, I know there are a few things here. People say, usually CAF or maybe FIFA should be sending notifications. I agree, but still, there should be people within your federation that work on this almost exclusively, because this was a big, big problem around a decade ago. I remember the qualifiers between 2010 2015. It seemed like every single match day there was a problem like this with one African team or another. Now, as things have sort of digitalized, it seems to be less and less the case, but obviously something happened over here and Teboho Mokoena wasn't told that he needed to sit out against Lesotho. So that news came up before the match, and you can imagine that that had an unsettling effect on the team. Just from the fact that Teboho Mokoena didn't start the match, but I think because there was all this uncertainty, so his teammate Obas from Sundowns, more of a defensive midfielder, he came in and replaced Mokoena, and almost like for like change. Tapelo Morena also came in on the right wing instead of Elias Mokoena, and that's something that I understand if South Africa are going to be playing away from home. I like using Morena as the right winger because he's a player that's very active, energetic, can get up and down the pitch, and can almost play as a wing back or as a right back. So he can help cover for the very attack-minded right back Kulisu Mudau if he wants to go up. And I like playing Morena, a more defensive-minded winger, instead of Mokoena when you're playing away from home and you need to be defensively solid. So I like the moves that Bruce made. Other than that, it was practically an unchanged team. And really off the bat, it felt like South Africa were the better side and that they were creating chances to score. And I thought they were even a little bit wasteful in the first half. They created 4 or 5 chances better than they did against Lesotho at home, but they were wasteful. I remember chances falling to Lyle Foster, or as the Arabic commentator called him, Lily Foster. I think even the French stadium announcer at Felicia, the Stade Félix Houphouët-Boigny, also called him Lille Foster. But I remember Mudau as well breaking through, getting down to the byline, and he had Foster if he just cut the ball across with a low cross, and he just I don't know what he tried to do. I don't know if he tried to shoot it or what, but he ends up kicking the ball out of play. It was just completely inexcusable. So South Africa were clearly the better side. Benin were probably a little more physical, but South Africa, despite the heat and the humidity, I thought they had complete control of the game and they were creating side chances, but they were inefficient. Um, and so when it finished 0-0, I was a little bit worried about just that inefficiency, and I would even almost say it almost seems like a lack of urgency, even though they created chances. I felt like South Africa could have created more. But then again, when I remember the humidity and those playing conditions, I tend to understand and give a little more leash and license to the South African national team. But quickly, as the second half started, South Africa score, and this time it's a long ball from the Orlando Pirates center half Sibisi to hit the left back Basadian, who hits a low cross to Foster. That's what Mudau should have did in the first half, and Lyle Foster jumbles the ball in. And honestly, first of all, CBC, I think I was praising him with Pirates during the CAF Champions League for his forward progressive passing. He does a great job of doing this as a center half, usually playing passes through the lines. But really, South Africa throughout the match, they were creating chances by playing long balls over the top, and he did that perfectly. A beautiful pass to Basadian, who didn't really have to control it really before hitting that low cross. Um, but as the goal was scored, it's been 2 matches now that I've watched Foster start for Bafana, and I just don't know what to make of him. I was expecting a lot from him heading into the AFCON last year. Then remember, for mental health reasons, he didn't go to the AFCON, um, and I wasn't really convinced by any South African strikers. at the AFCON and in the period after. But then Ikram Rainer sort of blew up, and he's sort of become my darling, and he's the player that I think, deserves to probably start. And I've been really impressed with his efficiency, his intelligence, his technical ability, his instinct for goals. Um, and I still think that he should be starting matches for South Africa, but Foster provides something a little bit different. He's more physical, right? Probably better hold-up play, younger, uh, maybe more potential, but I just find him at times a little bit clumsy. So I honestly don't know what to make of him, but it was good to see him get a goal. And then yeah, even after that, SA looked like they were in control, and they killed off the match when Jaden Adams, who comes on, the Mamelodi Sundowns midfielder, gets on the end of a set piece cross and nods the ball down with a header and scores, doubles South Africa's lead 2-0, and that's how the match finished. Again, if you've been listening to this podcast, as many of you I hope have, I've been banging this drum about the South African national team and South African domestic football for the better part of a year and a half now, because the South African national team hasn't lost a match on the pitch since the semifinals of the AFCON against Nigeria. So that's a very long time, and in my opinion, they've been just getting better and better and better. Um, Now, if they deduct points against Lesotho, technically they're going to have lost the match. But again, I don't really consider that. That's has nothing to do with their performance really. But what I would say about that entire situation, Hugo Bruce addressed it after the match. He said, "I have no comment to make. It should be resolved within a few weeks." I think just take it on the chin. Whatever it is, if you win the rest of your matches, you're in. You're still in a good enough position, and you're still good enough to qualify for the FIFA World Cup. And I still think you're favorites at this point in time. It's a little bit unfair. It's not unfair because the rules are the rules. So it's actually very fair if you are docked points. Um, but I mean, it is what it is. I think somebody at the SAFA has to be held accountable, and for the rest of it, just maybe just another reason to solidify mentality, get the team closer together, and make sure you don't drop any points in the coming matches. The other match in Group C that I watched was Nigeria versus Zimbabwe. And Nigeria had won in the first in match day 5 a few days ago, 2-0 at Rwanda. And that was a big, big result because this was their new coach, Eric Shell's first match in charge. And Eric Shell was brought in specifically to get World Cup qualifying back on track. So here you were thinking, okay, they won in Rwanda. Difficult match. Now they're at home against Zimbabwe, who are bottom of the group, even though we've said that Zimbabwe are better than their position in the table, really. Um, but technically, you would think that this should be a win if they managed to do that in the first match. And again, in the first match, I was really looking for the players to step up, technical leaders, Victor Osimhen, Ademola Lookman. When you have a new coach who's only been able to train your team for a couple of days, 2 or 3 days, you can't expect him and his tactics and his style of play to help you win matches. No, it's about more, for me, it's more about individualities. And that's what they did in the first match. It was Osimhen and Ademola Lookman. Here, they were creating chances in the first half. Osimhen had a chance at 10 minutes. Lookman had a chance at 15 minutes. Moses Simon had a chance at 20 minutes. And although they were creating chances, I still think that the Nigerian attack was a little too static. And I'm trying to watch like what exactly is the problem here? Because they have world-class players, obviously. What I would say is that when I was watching the match, and this is again like a journalist pretending that they're a coach, is simply my analysis. So, you know, um, any coach would probably just tell me to shut up, like, and I don't know what I'm talking about. But for me, what I see is when you look at the three attacking midfielders, Moses Simon, Ademola Lookman, and Samuel Chukwueze. For me, these are three players that like to be on the ball. Very talented players, very talented dribblers of the ball. Moses Simon, of course, can take set pieces. Ademola Lookman has a nose for goal. I think what Nigeria are sometimes lacking is maybe in those positions to have a player that excels off of the ball, that can provide perhaps an aerial threat, that can make runs into space. Because a lot of the times, what I see is Moses Simon having the ball on the wing. And by the way, Zimbabwe did a great job of stuffing up the middle of the pitch and forcing the ball out onto the wings. So Moses Simon would have the ball on the left wing, for example, and the only person that ever makes a run really is Victor Osimhen, and he'll make runs into space. He will, but he can't be the only one doing that. You probably need a second or a third player. Uh, Iwobi did it once in the second half, and Didi did it once in the second half and scuffed a shot. But other than that, you weren't getting runs from midfield, from deeper in midfield either. And so what I would say is, going back to South Africa, if you have a ball playing winger, like let's say Raleigh Mofokeng on the left wing, I think it's great to complement them with an off the ball runner like Elias Mokoena on the right wing. Morocco also have this when they play Sofiane Rahimi as a left winger. He's a player that can excel off of the ball, be an aerial threat. He's almost like a second striker, you know? So I don't know, I don't know who Nigeria have in that kind of a player profile. Let me see if let me look at the bench really quickly. Because Boniface is like a pure striker, Oroko Dare is a pure striker. I don't know if they have a player like that, but it would be really good to have like a taller winger, like let's say I don't know, like a Kai Havertz or something like that. Even though I know he played on the wing at Chelsea at times, but somebody like that. I think that's maybe what's lacking at times because it was static. It was like the ball gets on the wing to Chukwueze or to Simon or sometimes Lookman, and basically they look up. Nobody's making a run except for Osimhen, but he's well covered. And usually the winger just has to dribble on their own and try and force a cross through that the Zimbabwean defense dealt with pretty easily. So that's really what I saw as probably the main problem with the attack. But still, like I said, even then, Nigeria still created 4 to 5 real opportunities in the first half. Um, I liked the substitution in the second half from Eric Schell to bring on Eroko Dare, because he's an active center. First of all, it frees up Victor Osimhen. All of a sudden, you don't always have two defenders on Victor Osimhen. It pins the Zimbabwean defenders a little bit deeper. He provides a little bit of an aerial duel. So now you have one of those balls on the wing. You have two players in the box that are making the runs and that are threats aerially speaking, Erokodare and Osimhen, not just Osimhen. Um, and I thought they became immediately more dangerous after his introduction 60 minutes in. Just a few degrees more dangerous, but I thought they were immediately more dangerous and more active. And that's where the goal comes from. I believe it was a ball was played into Arokodare, I believe, who laid it off to Ola Aina, who put the cross into Victor Osimhen, who scored the goal. Yeah. And so it was really cool to see, first of all, Osimhen score again and step up again. And sometimes I feel bad for him because if Nigeria don't qualify to the World Cup, and spoiler alert, they don't end up winning this match, and so they've really fallen behind in the group. I think it would be such a shame because a player like him still hasn't played in a World Cup, and if he doesn't play in 2026, it's like wow, like, and he steps up, almost every single time. It's not his fault that they're not winning these matches, but it was cool to see that emotion out of him. I think he ran straight to Eric Schell, the coach, and gave him a big hug as well. So that was really, really cool. And you almost felt like, okay, Nigeria have done it now. Now they can hang on and get a precious, precious 3 points. But Zimbabwe almost replied like right after, like I think it was like 1 minute or 2 minutes after. And even in the first half, over the 90 minutes, 5 to 7 balls behind the Nigerian center halves that threatened the Nigerian goal. Troost-Ekong and Calvin Bassey, time and time again, let balls go in behind them, and the Zimbabwean strikers were quick on their feet. Um, yeah, they had a few chances. I think they even hit the bar after the Osimhen goal. So they were threatening, but the goal that Zimbabwe ends up scoring is actually beautifully constructed. It starts from their defense. They move the ball up the pitch into midfield, and really, I think the principal culprit here is Wilfred Ndidi. Because a midfield runner is coming in. Wilfred Ndidi seems like he's knackered, like dead tired. He doesn't track the midfield runner. The midfield runner is then face to face with William Troost-Ekong, who has slow feet, and the Zimbabwean striker manages to toe poke it past Nwabali. Now, could Eric Schell have thrown on another midfielder? Because I think at the time of the goal, he only had two midfielders on. That's another thing. And there was too much space in that midfield, and maybe Wilfred Ndidi had to cover too much space when he was that knackered. Um, Instead of bringing on Victor Boniface, for example, could he have brought on another midfielder? Probably. Um, but yeah, tough draw for Nigeria. It felt like a real hammer blow, and especially in the morning, as I mentioned, the news came that they could probably that South Africa were going to be docked 3 points, and so that was like something that they were waiting for. And then even then, they still managed to draw points against Zimbabwe. And now when you look at it throughout the FIFA World Cup qualifiers, Nigeria at home are winless in three matches. They draw against Lesotho, they draw against Zimbabwe, and they draw against South Africa. Unacceptable for a team that has the quality players that Nigeria has. Anyways, let's move on to Group D. Cameroon 3, Libya nil. This was a very much welcome response for Cameroon because in the first match, match day 5 a few days ago, they drew with Eswatini 0-0. And now they managed to have a convincing victory against Libya. Now, before the match, every time I talk about Cameroon to you guys, it's drama. And again, before this match, it was more drama again. Vincent Abubakar, the captain, addresses the national media, saying, "Please, we players, we never address the national media. We realize that we have to do our talking on the pitch, but we appeal to the authorities of the country to please let the assistant coach uh, be on the touchline during match days." Because Mark Brees's assistant coach, I guess, needs maybe authorization from the Football Federation run by Samuel Eto'o, and the coach and the Federation president are butting heads time and time again because the coach was appointed by the Ministry of Sport in Cameroon, not by the Federation president Samuel Eto'o, and as a result, it's a battle of egos. And so Samuel Eto'o doesn't give his assistant coach authorization to be on the touchline, and all of this affects the players. So you have Vincent Abubakar almost like a hostage video, like sitting there reading a text like, please, let our assistant coach come on the sideline of the pitch. He's like, oh my God, like this is no wonder they're so dysfunctional. But then they go in and they put in a very convincing performance. By the way, at an Amadou Ahidjo Stadium in Yaoundé, uh, another stadium that brings back great memories. Uh, let me tell you, Amadou Ahidjo Stadium is a very historic stadium. I think it was constructed for the 1972 African Cup of Nations, and it's centrally located in Yaoundé, unlike the other stadium. And the Cameroonian national team are the Indomitable Lions. Outside of the ground, there's a big statue of a lion. Now, the lion is a little bit cartoonish, so it's not really, I mean, no offense to the artist, but the rendering hasn't, in my opinion, is not the most realistic. But the craziest thing about it is you have the lion, and it became like a sort of meeting point for a lot of journalists. So, for example, if the BBC at times, for example, didn't have the rights to broadcast anything inside of the stadium because you need to pay for rights just to even broadcast a match report inside of the stadium. So sometimes we would say, let's go meet at the statue of the lion outside to do a post-match recap. So I would go meet them out there. Um, and the lion, when you look, you start like observing it. The artist actually, sorry to speak like this, but the artist actually drilled a hole in the lion's butt, I guess, for the butthole. And so I've never seen a statue with an actual butthole, but the one outside, the lion outside of the Amadou Ahidjo Stadium. If ever you go, you can check it out for yourself. So, anyways, brings back funny memories. Um, but yeah, the pitch was horrific though. I mean, as nice as it was to see the Amadou Ahidjo Stadium, the pitch was, my goodness, for both sides. For Cameroon and for Libya, and it's not conducive to technical football, to say the least. Now, the one player I was probably one of the players I was most impressed with was the new Cameroonian neo international Denis Namaso from FC Porto. He's a player that they were speaking about a lot prior to the international break, and rightfully so because, man, as you're watching the match, even if you're not paying attention, as soon as he touches the ball, you say, ah, he's a little bit different. Um, Cameroon, I think, and this is can be a stereotype at times, but I think there's a slight element of truth to it, don't always have the most technical players, particularly in midfield. Um, and so when you see Danny Namaso touch the ball, and he was playing in the central attacking midfield role, he's just on another level. He almost seems like, like a North African or a Southern African player with his technical ability. And so he just really facilitated things and made things much smoother. Um, and he would play in a central attacking midfielder role, but he would also rotate to the right maybe and have Brian and Mbumo move into the center. Muminat Nagamalo also played from left wing to right wing, so it was very fluid. It was really cool to see. Um, and yeah, Cameroon was really taking the game to Libya the entire time. Vincent Abubakar wins a penalty in the first half and scores it with absolute ease. And then as he scored it, I thought to myself, man, when are we going to have the conversation about Vincent Abubakar? And I've mentioned this prior on the podcast, but He scores two goals against Libya as the win 3-0. That takes him to 46 goals in 109 matches. Samuel Eto'o has 56 goals, I think, in 118 matches. Vincent Abubakar has passed Roger Mila and Patrick Mboma. And we don't really think about him that way. Even though when you think about it, he has golden boots at the AFCON when Cameroon hosted it. He scored the winning goal of an AFCON in 2017 against Egypt. That's a huge thing to have on your resume. But for some reason, we don't really think of Vincent Aboubakar amongst those Cameroonian greats when it comes to strikers. I think he deserves a little bit more respect, continent-wide, and even within the country of Cameroon. Um, but yeah, Libya are not even threatening Cameroon in the first half. I think the only real chance comes from a misplaced pass from the young midfielder Carlos Baleba. Moed Lefi sets up his partner, but they pretty bad miss. In the second half, the technical ability of Brian Mbumo and Carlos Baleba actually made a difference. Baleba hits a beautiful through ball to Brian Mbumo, and Brian Mbumo finishes after cutting in on his left foot. And then Brian Mbumo, again, dribbling down the right wing with his left foot, gets down to the byline and crosses it back to Vincent Aboubakar, and he finishes for 3-0. Mbumo, by the way, just every time I watch him with Cameroon, quality and efficient as well in front of goal. Good end product. And it makes me think he was probably one of the missing pieces at AFCON because Cameroon were pretty bad to watch in Cote d'Ivoire. If you remember, they were the side that crossed the ball the most. So they would just do is get the ball to George Kevin and Kudu on the left wing really, and he would I think they would cross the ball between 14 and 17 times per match. Almost no creativity to their game, and I think they really really missed Brian Mbeumo, who was injured right before the AFCON. Um, but yeah, with him, with Danny Namaso, with Baleba and Andre Frank Zambongisa when he comes back from injury in midfield, Abubakar, who's still doing it at the age, I think I want to say they're 33, 34 years old. Cameroon, again, I often say it, but I really think they're one of the better starting 11s on the continent. Um, and Mark Brice now, the Belgian coach, with all this controversy, all this dysfunction, is undefeated in his 10 matches as head coach of Cameroon. I think it's 6 wins and 4 draws. And the players seem to be on his side. I just always keep thinking, how good would they be if everything was smooth, logistically and politically? Something to ponder. Moving on to Group E, Morocco beats Tanzania 2-0. This is another, I think if you talk to Moroccan fans, they're going to say, good to get the 3 points, but this was another frustrating performance. They just expect more. There were even some boos during the match because in the first half, Morocco only had two shots against Tanzania. And Tanzania were setting up in a low block and they were running all over the place in the first half. And they were frustrating the Moroccans. And I think Walid Regragui even ends up saying in the post-match press conference that this is almost one of our plans was to really tire them in the first half, but then we rely on our quality and our depth, our squad of 23 to come in the second half and provide a killer blow. Um, the breakthrough came through via set pieces though. Corner kick first. I forget who took the corner kick. I think it's Bilal Khanous. Um, Joad Yamik gets a head on it, and then Nath Agert gets a head on it, and Morocco score. And then the second one was a penalty kick. I believe it was, yeah, won by Nusayr Mazraoui, who was playing right back this time around. And it was slotted home by completely blanking on who scored the penalty kick. But Morocco wins 2-0 on two set pieces. Um, Rudy Regragui says in the after the match that in tough matches like this we have to rely on set pieces. And Morocco actually very sneakily very good at set pieces. Even when they beat Gabon a few months back, like I think it was 5-1 or I think just if you look at the amount of set pieces they scored over the last 12 months, it's a lot. And I think they even have a set piece coach. So that's something to watch out for. But yeah, fans were they're more ambitious. And the coach said after the match, like, that's good. He said that means that we've grown in stature as a national team. If our fans are more ambitious, if they want us to win more impressively, that's good news. That means we have to be better. And I like that mentality from Walid Regragui. But at the same time, I understand a lot of fans' frustration when they say like players like at the summit is Azuli, Yusuf Nasiri, Asdin Unahi, Sufyan Amrabat in possession, who's going to be the right center back. There are a lot of problem players that were key essential cogs in the Moroccan national team in the past that aren't playing up to standard. And for some problems that this national team has, people don't see a solution. Like who's going to be the right center half, number one. Who are we going to have in midfield? Is there a striker that's going to demarcate themselves and become the undisputed striker for this national team? It's another international window where we don't have answers to those questions. And now the next international window is going to be in June, which is, 6 months ahead of the AFCON. And for any other national team, they would say, okay, we still have a little bit of time to find answers to those questions. But it feels like the fans from Morocco are just like, the, there's such a big expectation to not only do well at this AFCON because you're hosting it, but to win this AFCON for the first time in 50 years. They feel like the team has to be perfect almost now and continue that perfection into the AFCON. Don't know if those are unrealistic expectations or not, but for me, it just exposes and shows um, the level of nervousness on one hand, excitement on the other, and expectation and pressure that the Moroccan national team is going to have. So it's going to be fascinating to observe that narrative uh, in the coming months ahead of time. I also quickly watched a little bit of Cote d'Ivoire versus the Gambia. I'm just going to touch on it quickly. This match only finished 1-0, but when I watched it, I thought Cote d'Ivoire could have won 3 or 4-0. They were the much better side. And even though a lot of Ivorian players like, Simon Adingra, Sebastien Aller, Ibrahim Sangare, Franck Kessié, Nicolas Pepe, they aren't performing, very, very well with their clubs. Maybe we expected them to have better club careers, even though some of them are very young, like Simon Adingra. Man, when they play with their national team, like Adingra had a great game. He reminded me of the Adingra that we saw back at the AFCON, and he still had that connection with Sebastien Aller. So they're players that are stepping up when they play with their national teams. But yeah, Nicolas Pepe also looked good, and yeah. I really, really liked what I saw from Cote d'Ivoire, even though they only won 1-0. That was the only negative point, was that they should have probably won by another goal or two. The most impressive side in match day 6 was Algeria beating Mozambique 5-1. Now, the reason why I say this is that Mozambique and Algeria were level coming into this match with 12 points apiece. Mozambique, in my opinion, one of the more underrated sides on the continent. They had a pretty good AFCON. If you remember, they eliminated Ghana on the last day of the group stages. They had good AFCON qualifiers. Um, and obviously, they've been performing in the FIFA World Cup qualifiers. So, Uh, they have the same coach for the entire time. He's familiar with the players. And the coach, Chiquito Conde, came into this match and he said, this is probably the most important match in our country's history. Like if they knew that if they were going to get a win in Algeria, they have a very good chance of going to the World Cup. So they came in with a lot of pressure. Not pressure, I would say they understood the importance of this match. And in Algeria, same thing. This was a Ramadan match, so the match was at 10 p.m. In a brand new stadium. First time the Algerian national team plays in the stadium in Tizi Ouzou, about 100 kilometers east of Algiers. A bunch of Algerians from all over the country went there, so restaurants were giving free dinners and free meals, and it was kind of a really festive atmosphere, really cool. Um, so it was a big occasion. I think it was a big match, and so I was really curious to see how both teams would be able to deal with that. And Algeria were. I haven't seen this good of a performance from the Algerian national team under this coach, Vladimir Petkovic, in his year and a half as the Algerian national team coach. And I haven't seen such positive momentum with the Algerian national team really since we went on that unbeaten streak of 35 matches after the AFCON 2019 to about the end of 2021. Like that, it feels like Algeria is slowly but surely making their way back here. Um, and it's a few different reasons. In my opinion, there are a lot of young players in this national team that don't have egos, that really are, in French they say they're generous with their effort, like they're tracking back, if there's a player that's open, they're gonna pass the ball. They're not worrying about their statistics. And case in point really is the new star of Algerian football, and in my opinion, one of the new stars of African football. If you haven't heard of him yet, Mohamed Amin Amoura. Over this international break, he scored 2 goals against Botswana, and now he scored 3 goals against Mozambique. 5 goals in these 2 matches. That's more than many of the national teams that played over the last 2 matches. He also has six goals in his last three matches because he scored back in November, and he has seven goals in his last six. So he's been very, very consistent with his output. He also has some assists, by the way, in terms of other goal contributions. He's a player that in Belgium with Royal Union Saint-Gilloise has scored more than I think 25 goals. And this year with Wolfsburg, in his first year in a new league with a new club, has been able to make himself an undisputed starter and has been very, very effective as well as a forward player, not necessarily an out and out striker. And what he offers really is so much pace, so much again generosity, willingness to attack, and a lot of these players play with a smile on their face. When I think about the bad times of the Algerian national team of 2, 3, 4 years ago, I think about players moaning, coach moaning, at the referee, complaining about the state of the pitch, complaining about VAR. That was like one of the main drawbacks of Jamal Belmadi. I thought about, getting into like fights with the press. Uh, yeah, these are like the bad moments that I can remember from the Algerian national team. But this team with like players like Amoura, Hisham Boudaoui in midfield, even some of the youngsters that came onto the pitch like Ibrahim Maza, um, Amin Guiri's come in. All of them, I think they're playing with a lot less ego. And they're just worried about fulfilling their job and doing things like tracking back. At a certain point at the AFCON, like Riyad Mahrez and Yusuf Belali, because they thought they were so good, and they are so good, I mean, objectively speaking, but they thought they didn't have to track back. And that just completely handicaps your team. I'm seeing a little bit of a difference in attitude now, and that's really, really good to see. And I think it's because there's a younger generation that's coming and they realize they have to prove themselves. But yeah, Amoura scores a hat trick here. He has an assist, and he was a star of the game. Riyad Mahrez was also very, very good on the other wing. It's good to see him back. Uh, at that level. Uh, the entire defense was really good. The goalkeeper was good. Everybody was good, really. This was a complete performance from the Algerian national team. They scored three goals in the first 30 minutes. So yeah, positive momentum, vibes are good, and Algeria just has to carry this on, but they're well on their way to qualifying for the World Cup as well. The last team I'm going to talk about, a quick note on Tunisia, then we'll go to Ghana, and then we'll call it a wrap. Tunisia had lined up with the same lineup that they did against Liberia, this time against Malawi. They went 2-0 at home. The only difference really is they took out Saif Al and they brought in Elias Hashouri on the left wing. Elias Hashouri is a player that plays for the FC Copenhagen, very technical, great at dribbling. His main criticism has been his consistency. But in this match, he creates both goals with the cross and with scoring the penalty. And he didn't win the penalty, but I think it was good that the Tunisian national team gave him the chance to score the penalty to boost his confidence because confidence breeds consistency, in my opinion. So I think it's good to see that he had a good match. I think he could be a Youssef Msakni replacement. But the Tunisian national team, the fact that he didn't change the side so much means that, in my opinion, Sami Trabelsi, the new coach, this was his second match in this stint. He knows who he wants to rely on. And the goalkeeper, Ayman Dahman, had a great international break. The defenders had a great international break. Hannibal Mezri in midfield had a great international break. Slowly but surely, it feels like Tunisia are coming back. I think they took a step forward this international break, but they're still, I think, far from where they want to be. They realize that this isn't the team right now that can probably win an AFCON, in my opinion, and I think in many Tunisian fans' opinion, but they've taken a step forward, and I don't think they're very, very far away from that as well. They just need a few more adjustments. Now, Madagascar versus Ghana, and then we'll call it a night because it's 4 in the morning over here. Now, with Ghana, I didn't talk about the last match against Chad, but they won 5-0 in Accra. And if you remember in November, that was probably one of the worst AFCON qualifying campaigns I had ever seen from an African heavyweight in recent memory. Uh, Eliminated by Sudan and Angola, I think, uh, and it felt like a lot of Black Stars fans fell out of love with their national team. And I was completely shocked that the coach Otto Addo managed to retain his job from last November all the way to this March. Now they made some structural changes. They brought in this veteran German manager, Winfried Schaffer, who Schaefer, as you might remember, I think was the coach of the 2002 AFCON Cameroon team. I think it was one of the AFCON winning sides of Cameroon of 2000 or 2002. I think it was 2002. But he's come into a technical director sort of advisory role. Um, so they made a few, adjustments here and there, but by and large, it was practically the same setup, same players. And when you have that, you very quickly need to get the supporters back on your side. And it starts in the first match against Chad a few days ago. They scored, I think, a goal within the first 10 minutes. And the crowd in the crowd was great. I'm used to seeing those crowds in Kumasi, but the crowd in the crowd was really, really good as well. And then one goal became another. And it just felt good against Chad, and Thomas Partey was back. He missed the international window back in November. Felt like maybe he wasn't happy with a few things. Maybe there was some criticism. Maybe people feel like he doesn't care about the Black Stars as much. And so I don't know. So they won that first match 5-0, and now they're away to Madagascar, not in Madagascar, but away to Madagascar in Morocco. I think they were playing in Hoceima, it's a nice, beautiful city in Morocco. And you're thinking, okay, what can they do now? Because Madagascar are very competitive. I think they're second in the group as well. Um, and they line up with a 5-3-2 that works to a T. Particularly defensively, I thought Ghana were incredibly stout, blocking in the middle of the pitch. And they had the investment of all 11 players tracking back, including Mohamed Kudus, including Jordan Ayew, including Antoine Semenyo, the front three. And Jordan Ayew in particular, he's a player that I've been hypercritical of. I would say practically for his entire career. I've said in the past that if his last name wasn't IU and if he wasn't who he was, I don't think he would have the career that he would have had. All of that said, he put in a great performance and he had a really good international window. And what he did a few things very, very well. So he tracked back defensively, but in particular set pieces. Man, he had a good free kick in the 10th minute. Thomas Partey scored. He pitched in again with corner kicks. He was deadly with his set pieces. I think Gary Al Smith. I saw a tweet of his that said with Jordan Ayew 6 games in the FIFA World Cup qualifiers, 5 goals and 4 assists. Not bad at all, right? Um, Thomas Partey though scored the 2 goals from set pieces. Scored and it looked like he was invested. Um, Get another Gary Elspeth tweet. Said that these are Thomas Partey's first goals with the Ghanaian national team since the goal that sent them to the 2022 FIFA World Cup in that playoff against Nigeria. So yeah, in the 59th minute, so Ayew had two assists from set pieces to Thomas Partey, and then in the 59th minute, he gets his hat trick of assists, breaking away from a challenge, turning away from a defender, between the lines, and slotting in a beautiful pass to Mohamed Kudus, who does his trademark celebration, sitting on the advertising boards. So yeah, now Ghana are at least 3 points ahead of the rest of the group, potentially 5 points ahead of. Actually, I wrote that note prior to these night's matches. I think they're th I think they're 3 points ahead of the rest of the group, yeah, because Comoros won against Chad. So it's not over because this is a very tight group and teams will take points off of one another. But it was really good for Ghana to have 8 goals for 0 goals against and to sort of get the public back on their side. Like, okay, everything that happened before, that's in the past. Let's put it behind us and let's move forward. It feels like a very, very important page was turned for Ghana. We'll see if they can carry that on in June. Been going for a very long time now, so we're going to cut it short here. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. I apologize about the audio here. My microphone is acting up. I need to buy a new cable for my microphone, so I'm recording the audio here directly onto my laptop. I don't think the audio quality is going to be great, but in any case, thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. If you like these matches, if you like this podcast, please give us a thumbs up. Comment any of your observations from the FIFA World Cup qualifiers from Matchday 5, Matchday 6, and keep it locked in because there's a lot of African football to talk about in the very near future, including, of course, the CAF Champions League, which we've been waiting for very, very patiently for many, many weeks now. All right, y'all, keep it locked in to the African Five Side podcast, and we're going to speak soon. Peace.